Well, thank you so much, Daryl, for that introduction. That's the best one yet. Usually they read everything that you've done in the last few years, and I was going to change it to I'm Scott from Shelbrook. But I do appreciate it. Daryl is almost a constituent of Rosthern Shelbrook. He has to move about 5 miles to the east, I guess, and he'll make it in there, and we're gathering up a volunteer kind of fund there to move him over to so that he can become a constituent of what I think is the greatest constituency in this province. And Randy Hoback agrees with me because he lives down the street from me. But welcome, Randy, as well. And John, thank you for those comments. They're greatly appreciated. And thank you to both of you for the work that you do on behalf of our province, Western Canada, and the industries like agriculture, like energy, like mining, like manufacturing that are important to what we do in this room and important to the industries and important to our community. So thank you very much for everything that you do. And we have a different ag minister in this province, in Lyle Stewart, and it's great to see you. He is not a supporter of the carbon tax, if that doesn't surprise you. I know that for a fact because I sat with him in the House for a year or so, and he has all sorts of language when we talk about a carbon tax, which is likely why I'm up here and he's down there. I was thinking of the picture that Sherilyn had put up here of her father when he discusses ag policy, and it looks like me the last few months whenever we talk about carbon taxation or equalization or pipelines, and it looks like you too, Lyle. Anyway, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Western Canadian Wheat Growers, the members of that organization, your executive team, and welcome everyone else to Regina and to the Western Canadian Farm Progress Show this year. This is an exciting time of year. We have so many visitors coming to this city from outside of this province, many from outside of this nation, and beyond our Canadian shores that sometimes we don't always have as much access to as we'd like, but to see the wonderful displays and conduct some business here, as I said, to do some business here in our great industry, and of course to do some socializing. That's a big part of what we do at this event as well, as we meet old friends, we make some new friends. I talked to a few people here that I haven't talked to for a number of months, and we always must remember this as you socialize at the Farm Progress Show, is what happens at the Farm Progress Show in Regina always stays at the Farm Progress Show in Regina. That's the most important rule, and it's #1 rule. But this evening, ladies and gentlemen, I want to touch on a number of topics that we have before us with respect to farm policy. I wasn't going to talk about carbon tax, but I suppose I will now just a little bit. But I think I was kidding. Areas where I think our views in this room align very closely with the government of Saskatchewan, areas where our joint advocacy is absolutely necessary to ensure that your membership and our farmers can continue to do what they do in a responsible manner, in a competitive manner, as well as in a sustainable manner, and to contribute to the well-being of your community, our province, and our nation of Canada, and I would put forward to the world as well. I do want to discuss this evening our shared concern about a carbon tax. I want to discuss the rising threat of protectionism, most specifically in North America. And I was in Washington just a couple of weeks ago to talk specific to this issue, and a proposal to overhaul the federal equalization program that we put forward yesterday to ensure that we can have an opportunity to make that program fair for more Canadians, including Canadians that work and live in this province. But ladies and gentlemen, before any of that, I just want to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you to each of you in this room, and through you to other producers in your community. I want to thank you for your willingness as an organization, as an individuals, to mix it up every now and again, to throw off the gloves and to defend market-oriented solutions in our province and in our nation, and often enter into some of the more contentious debates that are agricultural related in our nation. For many years, you've been the voice of reason in this debate, and for many years, you've served as a deep repository of common sense in this country, and it's lacking from time to time. As evidenced in your long list of policy objectives that were most recently put up here, but as you go through history, I think about the grain marketing freedom debate years ago and the, what is it, Canadians with beer? Is that what you said, Sherilyn? And that debate from years ago, 20 years ago or better, to the regulation of pesticides and an ongoing conversation, to biotechnology. And I was up at the Global Food Security Conference this afternoon, and addressed our researchers from 24 different countries. To North American free trade, which is top of mind today, you've been on the right side of so many of these issues, and it's important to continue that advocacy. And all throughout that, you have, as producers in this province and advocates in this province, you've remained true to the principles that you have that are so important. We owe you, on behalf of the province, our deep gratitude for your persistent and determined advocacy on behalf of Saskatchewan. You have made agriculture stronger in this province, and you have made agriculture better in this province, and we appreciate that advocacy. And yet again, I never end without an ask. We need that continued advocacy on these topics that were on the screen earlier, and most notably on topics such as carbon taxation, which would have a very, very detrimental effect to our communities, to industries in our communities, and to this industry, the backbone of our economy in this province, the industry of agriculture. We need to continue to engage at every level possible, because this ineffective and damaging policy that's been put forward threatens, in many ways, the profitability of our industry of agriculture, not just in Saskatchewan, but I would put forward across the nation. Despite what Lyle's colleague, the federal agriculture minister, may say, this is a problematic policy for this industry. The good news is this, is that we are gaining some new allies in our position. Most notably last week, as everyone knows, we had an Ontario election. Premier-designate Doug Ford has already announced that his first act when he forms government would be to cancel Ontario's cap-and-trade scheme. They've also identified that it's an ineffective policy. He'll challenge the federal government's authority to impose this tax on Ontarians. We've already launched to our Court of Appeal, our reference case to rule on the constitutionality of this flawed policy, this carbon taxation policy. And in our view, Ottawa, what they are trying to do, our federal government is attempting to impose this policy on some provinces, so far one province, Saskatchewan, but not others, and it's based on how we are exercising what is our own legislative jurisdiction here within our borders. Essentially what they're saying, that if they don't like your plan, they'll impose their own plan, and they'll impose a carbon tax in your jurisdiction. Well, this isn't how our Constitution in this nation works. Provinces are not, will not be subsidiaries to the federal government. And you should know that this opposition to our carbon tax in our province in no way should anyone say that that puts us forward as climate change deniers or anything of the sort. We just think that a carbon tax is an ineffective tool, and it's the wrong way to address the challenge that's before our Earth. First of all, like I said, it doesn't work. It's an ineffective policy. Ladies and gentlemen, remember this, if you remember anything tonight. No jurisdiction in the world has imposed a carbon tax and have seen a corresponding reduction in greenhouse gases because of the implementation of that tax. Australia went away from it. Ontario is going to go away from it. In Saskatchewan, we make our living by trade, which is why NAFTA is such an important deal to us. We are one of the top exporters in Canada on a per capita basis. We are also one of the top exporters in the world on a per capita basis. Each and every year, our 1,171,000 people now, we do business with over 150 countries all over the world. These are industries that are doing business with these countries and people in these countries that are driving our economy. And those include agriculture, energy, manufacturing, mining, and they're all energy intensive. They all emit greenhouse gases. In fact, nearly a quarter of our emissions in this province do come from the industry of agriculture. Now, I know the federal government has stated that all the money raised from a carbon tax will stay in Saskatchewan. We're getting into the hypothetical part of my speech because we won't have one, but they do call it a revenue-neutral carbon tax. Say that we can do whatever we want with the money. That we could lower another tax or we could provide rebates to whoever we chose. So let's just consider that very hypothetical situation for a moment. Let's say we exempt agriculture from the carbon tax. The tax would still go on the fuel that's used by our truckers. The tax would still go on the trains that transport our grain to the coast. It would still go on the natural gas used to make fertilizer that we purchase each and every year. It would still go on the chemicals that are sold to our producers in this province. How would we ever accurately determine how much we should rebate each farmer for each of those transactions? And even if we were able to do that, how would we administer such a government-sponsored shell game is essentially what this is, where the government grabs your money with one hand, it gives it back with the other, And if you go back to my original point about the effectiveness of this policy, what's the point of doing any of that? It doesn't work. Folks, on what we are doing, here's the challenging thing that I actually struggle with. Why the federal government doesn't acknowledge what we have in place in this province. Agriculture is already playing a huge role in addressing climate change, not just within our borders, but far beyond our borders and around the world. And this is essential information that we need to get out there. We need to get this information not only to our federal government, and I'm working on that, but also to our customers all around the world, and I'm going to continue to work on that with trips to the United States again next week, and India and China and Bangladesh this fall. Last fall, though, Dustin Duncan, our Minister of the Environment, released our Made in Saskatchewan climate change strategy, and it's entitled The Prairie Resilience. It's a comprehensive document. It's an innovative document. We're going to build on it as we go through this summer, but it's also a document that realizes the reality of our province. And it will result in actual emissions reductions without a carbon tax. It will result in the recognition of the sequestration opportunities that we have in agriculture and forestry and carbon capture and storage in this province. We continue to expand renewables in this province. We're at 25%, heading to 50%. Alberta's target, I believe, is 30%, to put it in perspective. We invested in a world-leading carbon capture and storage project at Boundary Dam 3, but more relevant to you in this room, in that plan for prairie resilience, we're developing an offset system that will recognize Saskatchewan as a carbon sink and as a research leader in agriculture. Carbon intensity in agriculture has been dropping not only in this province but across the nation, in part because of research that has been undertaken in this province, in genetics, in agronomy, in zero-till technology, for instance, which was mentioned earlier. But in Saskatchewan, for example, we manufacture now air drills and we export them all around the world. We don't just use them here, we export them. Companies like Bourgault, what was Flexicoil, now CNH. We have Pillar Laser Works, Seedmaster, Seedhawk, Morris. We have other zero-till support equipment from Degelman, from Brandt. But these air drills are now helping reduce emissions by sequestering carbon in soils, not just in Saskatchewan, but in places like Russia and Kazakhstan and Australia and the United States and faraway places like Manitoba and Alberta. But here at home, in our province, 90% of our land is cultivated using those very drills. It's cultivating using zero or minimum till practices. In addition, we add to that what we have done in the way of crop genetics. And I think of Al Slinkard, a professor at the College of Agriculture, a professor of mine when I attended there years ago, and his inroads into the pulse crops that have seen our acreages in this province soar over the last number of years. In 1990, there was 400,000 acres of pulse crops, 7 million acres in the province of Saskatchewan last year. We account for 84% of Canada's lentil exports, 75% of our nation's pea exports. Peas, chickpeas, lentils, we all know fix nitrogen. They offset our carbon footprint in this province by a further 2 million tons. The upshot of this is Saskatchewan's crop agricultural soils today are carbon neutral, and we're on a trajectory to be a great carbon sink. And I said earlier, a quarter of our emissions in this province come from agriculture, and it's an industry that's carbon neutral because of the changes that we have made over the last number of years. In 2016, our soils, through zero-till and minimum-till agriculture, sequestered 12 million tons of carbon dioxide. That's not counting the millions of tons that are sequestered in our grasslands each and every year. Zero-till technology, combined with increasing our pulse acreages, as I said, has essentially made agriculture in Saskatchewan carbon neutral. It's made our backbone industry tremendously sustainable, and it's important that our customers know this. They are increasingly concerned as we go through the months and the years with how their food is produced, and if you truly care about global climate change, you will buy more agriculture products from this province because of the way they are produced. We are making an impact beyond our borders, as I said now. We're growing lentils in Alberta, in John Barlow's area. We're growing beans in Ontario, in Doug Ford's area, maybe not right in his area. But they use zero-till practices in places like Manitoba and North Dakota. Across Canada, as a matter of fact, from 2005 to 2015, emissions from our agriculture industry actually dropped. Today, we're producing more food, we're using less energy, we're emitting fewer greenhouse gases, we're sequestering increasing amounts of carbon in our soils. We are more efficient than we have ever been. Our farmers and ranchers in this nation and in this province are feeding the world, and we're not only doing so affordably, we're doing so as sustainably as anybody else on earth. My friends, this is a story that needs to be told. And first and foremost, it needs to be told to our customers, and first and foremost, it needs to be told to our federal government. Now, we are in uncertain times as we face some trade challenges with the United States, and we see that heating up. And I said I was down there 2 weeks. I was down there when the comments about 1812 and the White House were made, and I went into my meeting the next morning, and I sat down with, I think it was Senator Lindsey Graham, and his first question was, why did you burn down our White House? I said, well, it wasn't me. and I said, you know, when 25 years ago when we first signed the North American Free Trade Agreement, things got tense. They're tough and challenging conversations, and they escalate from time to time. And I said, we're going to be on a call this afternoon in a response to this comment about burning down the White House, and you need to understand this was the day of the last game between the Washington Capitals and the Las Vegas Golden Knights. I said, we're going to have a conversation about recalling our Canadian hockey players. We're going to start with Braden Holtby. We're going to bring him back to Saskatchewan. And then we're going to try to sign a NAFTA deal by tonight. But I can tell you this, on the issue of tariffs, we do support the counter tariffs that have been put forward by our Prime Minister. We do need to present a united front in Canada, and I know the members of the opposition have done just that every time they leave this country. It is very important that we do have that united front, but we need to engage. If I learned anything, and I learned a lot from my time down there, we need to engage, and engage some more. This is an important deal for us. Minister Freeland has been engaging. Her trade negotiators have been engaging. We need our Prime Minister to engage and engage heartily. This is the most important trade deal we have. The importance to this province is 85% of our imports come from that nation, the United States of America, and 55% of our exports go to that nation, the United States of America. It is most certainly an important trade agreement for us in Canada, and it should be led in an increased ambition by our Prime Minister. Since becoming Premier a short time ago, I've had the opportunity to visit the United States twice, and I'm going again on Monday. I've attended a meeting of the governors and premiers in Phoenix, and I was in Washington, where I met, as I said, with a number of senior cabinet officials, I think 9 House representatives and senators. I met with the Agriculture Secretary, Sonny Perdue, and we had a good conversation. I met with Wilbur Ross, the Secretary of Commerce, who's working on the steel tariffs under Section 232. I met with their EPA administrator, Scott Pruitt, on what they are doing in the U.S. with respect to regulations. I met with Mick Mulvaney, the director of the budget in the United States, and they were good and positive meetings, and I hope they have advanced our Canadian cause in getting to an agreement of trade. On all of those trips, both of those trips and any other opportunities that I've had, I make the point that Canada and the United States have benefited enormously from this trade agreement that we have. Under NAFTA, annual two-way trade between our two nations, Canada and the U.S., has more than doubled to $544 billion. And that trade has brought real benefits for American workers and families, as well as Canadian workers and families. Today in the U.S., about 9 million jobs are dependent on trade and investment with our nation in Canada. And when I was in Phoenix, we met with the Arizona Canadian Business Council, and there's 350 to 400 businesses that are part of that council and based out of Phoenix. There is not only trade, but investment that is flowing back and forth across that border. And last year, despite what President Trump said from the White House, the U.S. does have a trade surplus with our nation. It most certainly is true. And under NAFTA, we have had the opportunity to establish what is a continental supply chain to the world, and it's operated well. It's operated well by design. It's operated efficiently for 2.5 decades now. We need to modernize that agreement and move forward. But for example, there's John Deere tractor factory, if any of you have a John Deere tractor at home, located in Waterloo, Iowa, and you would already know that. Some of the tractors that are made in Waterloo are sold into Saskatchewan, as we know, where they're used in the production of oats, and a portion of those Saskatchewan oats very quickly turn around when we get proper rail service or shipped back to Iowa, to Cedar Falls, and they're used to make Cheerios and Quaker Oats and among a number of other things. What really becomes of this relationship between the Canada and U.S. is tariffs really begin to bite, in particular when we retaliate in kind, and we need to. But what becomes of that, I'm just not sure, and it needs to end. But I do know this. Uncertainty in our business environment and our agriculture environment is not good, and it's particularly harmful now for our Canadian economy as we deal with a number of other headwinds. Headwinds like carbon taxation, and our inability to build a pipeline in this country, our inability to access our coastline with that energy product so that we can continue to put our potash and our grain products on rail. Ladies and gentlemen, on the trade file, it seems to me that there's not going to be an immediate fix to this, and we need to continue to put our nose to the grindstone and get to where we need to be over the next number of months. We're dealing with a U.S. administration that operates a little differently than what we're used to say the least. And all we can do, I think, is to make the case that lower tariffs are better for everyone. And they always have been, and they always will be better for everyone. Our North American Free Trade Agreement over the last 2.5 decades has been beneficial for everyone on both sides of the border, industries and jobs and communities and people. And we need to engage and engage and engage again until we get that modernized agreement signed. And then I'll be here, and why I'm meeting with governors across the nation as much and as often as I can is then it will be up to subnational leaders to engage to ensure that where the rubber meets the road in industry-specific regulations, that it works for both sides of the border, but it works to be a positive trade agreement for Saskatchewan. This is the case that we continue to tell. This is the case that we have expressed when we were in Washington. This is the case that we will express when we get to India, when we get to China, when we get to Bangladesh, and we have trade irritants with those countries as well. But we will continue to make this Saskatchewan case wherever we go. Because as an author that I read recently, Matt Ridley, he says this, and I quote, "The message from history is blatantly obvious. Free trade causes mutual prosperity, while protectionism causes poverty. There is not a single example of a country opening its borders to trade and ending up poor," end quote. That's a very meaningful quote. My friends, as your government, we will stay on top of this file. We will work with you to advocate for market access, not only in the United States, but around the world. But we also need to take care of business right here at home. Ladies and gentlemen, just a final item that I want to make a few comments on is a long-standing concern that the government of Saskatchewan, and now, as I have found out, many others across the nation have, and it's perhaps a burr in your saddle as well, but have with our equalization formula. Yesterday, I announced a plan that would make equalization fairer and more effective for more Canadians across the nation, and we call it the 50-50 formula. Right now, equalization is calculated using a complex formula, and it's not understood by many Canadians. And the crucial factor of the calculation is fiscal capacity, a province's ability to pay for services. According to the formula, energy-producing provinces like Alberta, Saskatchewan, Newfoundland and Labrador have a higher fiscal capacity than Quebec and some of our maritime provinces. Quebec, a province with enormous hydro revenues that are not included in this particular formula, have been the single biggest recipient by far since the inception of this program in 1957. In fact, they've received over 50% of the disbursements. During the last 11 years alone, Saskatchewan has received $0 from the federal government or from the equalization formula. A couple of years ago, our oil prices plummeted here in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Newfoundland and Labrador, and thousands of people lost their jobs. We received $0, and we continue to receive $0, and we will continue to receive $0 under the current formula. Quebec, by contrast, over these same 11 years, has received $100 billion in equalization. That's 10% of the revenues in their provincial line item budgets, $11.7 billion just this past year. As I said, since 1957, Quebec has actually received $221 billion through the equalization formula. And this province gives us all the appearances of being a perpetual recipient under the current formula if nothing is changed. With this money, we've seen Quebec subsidize tuition and childcare while putting up roadblocks for some of our industries that might lessen the province's dependency on equalization. This month, the Quebec government banned fracking for shale gas and made it tougher to explore for oil, and advocated voicefully, and I would say quite effectively, for stopping Energy East. It's quite easy to be virtuous when the money continues to flow. Newfoundland and Labrador, due to low energy prices, are experiencing a 14% unemployment rate and are not collecting a nickel from the current equalization formula. They have neighbors that have about a 7% unemployment rate and are receiving about $2 billion a year, just under. The 50-50 plan that we put forward would be a small step to remedy what I think is an injustice. Under this proposal that we put forward, half of the equalization pool would be distributed on a per capita basis, the same way as our healthcare transfers or our social transfers. The other half would continue to be dispensed under the existing formula, 50-50. The 50-50 plan would ensure that all provinces would receive some equalization payment. Saskatchewan, under our formula, the new formula that we put forward, would receive about $300 million a year. That's not a windfall in what is a $14 billion budget here in this province, or a $19 billion equalization pool. But it's money that would allow us to help us pay for important public services. And we would still contribute about $600 million, and we would remain a have province. My friends, this is the time to have this discussion. There will be a formal review by the federal government of equalization in the year 2019, and we think that the 50-50 formula should be considered. It's a good point to start this discussion in that review. And we hope that you will join in advocating for a change in a program that has been unfair to many Canadians across the nation. When one province receives more than half the money and won't take the most basic and elemental steps to grow their economy, something about this formula is broken. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just conclude with this promise. For as long as the Saskatchewan Party has the honor to form government in this province, we'll be in your corner. Whether it's advocating for market access, whether it's investing record amounts in research, whether it's supporting value-added processing or holding our railways to account to ensure we can continue to have access to our coastline. We'll work with not only the Western Canadian wheat growers, but our agriculture industry in general. We have a great partnership. And we have a relationship that works. Even from time to time, I know we may have some differences of opinion. But more than anything, I think it's fair to say that we have a long-standing friendship. May that friendship continue for years to come. I want to thank you for listening here this evening. I want you to enjoy your evening, and I wish you all the best this week at the show.